welcome back to Obsession Engineering and welcome back to the 1998 R1 project. As you can see, I already have the fuel tank off it because I'm hunting around in the carburetors again to see if I can finally find the fault that makes it, when you shut the throttle, just sort of hold on to its revs a bit. So come and join the fun while we look at carburetors yet again. So the first thing that I did today, which I forgot to actually video, was I took off this connector. This is the throttle position sensor for the carburetors, and I took this off and I put a multimeter onto the points and I checked the resistance when the throttle was fully closed, sort of its maximum resistance and its resistance as you open the throttle. It's all quite detailed in the workshop manual, and really you need to know the actual resistances or it's pointless checking. So to do that, I would recommend getting a workshop manual. It is relatively straightforward. The next thing to do is a little trick that Yamaha have put on the bike. So, with everything connected, apart from the fuel tank, if I turn the ignition on, if I then go down here, and using my wrong hand, if I disconnect the throttle position sensor wires, like that, and then plug them back in, the bike goes into throttle position sensor setting mode. And you can see here it's pointing to 10,000. Give or take a little bit. And according to the workshop manual, that means the position setting is wrong. So what I'm going to do now is take the carburetors off, tweak the throttle position setting, and see if I can make this sit at 5,000. Apparently if it sits at 0 it's too low, 5,000 the throttle position is happy, and 10,000 it's too high. So carburetors off again because I can't get to the screws on the throttle position sensor with the carbs on the bike. So to do this adjustment, I don't want to take the carbs all the way off the bike because I want to be able to tweak the position of this. Basically I'm going to loosen these bolts and slide it round a little bit one way or the other, and then reconnect the electrical connector and see if we get a good reading or not. So I need the carbs near the bike, so they're just going to hang there. I'm going to try and find the correct tool for undoing these because they're security Torx bit. Why you'd put security things in something that you know will need adjusting one day is a bit of a mystery though. Right, so I've loosened this bolt and the one at the bottom, down there, and now I'm just going to tweak this a little bit, just a few degrees. Not that much, that was too much. This is a bit of a game. Right, that's just a few degrees. Now I'm going to drop the carbs down a little bit, plug that back in and see what difference it makes, and if it comes to it I can leave that loose and just tweak it a little bit when the bike's turned on, see if it actually tells me the right answer, then tighten the screws back up. Right, so here we go, ignition on, go back down here, pull the connector off and then back on again. I will admit this is a right faff one-handed. There we go, that's off, then back on again, and now we're too low. So if I adjust, right, I just gave that a little tweak and it's jumped up to 5. So what I'm going to do now is tighten the screws up and see if it stays at 5. Right, so I've tightened the screws up, reconnected the sensor, and we're still at 5. When I first tried to tighten the screw up, it jumped back up to 10, so I've tweaked it back down again. Little bit sensitive, to say the least, but then a sensor should be sensitive, I suppose. I was of two minds though, I couldn't decide what to do. But we have two options. One of them was put it all back together and go and ride it. The other option is to whip the diaphragm covers off and just make sure all the little springs in the diaphragms are okay and there's no splits in the diaphragms. While I'm here, this is one thing I've not checked yet and I really should. So, I'm going to take the tops off the carbs. Now what I don't want to do is actually take all the carbs off again, because it's a bit of a faff with cables and bits, so I am doing everything with the carbs in situ, but I have put a little bit of blue roll down the inlet port so we don't drop anything important into the engine. So, carb top off, and what we've got here is a spring that holds the needle in place, and a real delicate little rubber diaphragm. So I'm just going to very, very carefully take the diaphragm out with the spring and everything. In fact, we'll take the spring out and put it out of the way. I'm just going to take the diaphragms off each carb, make sure there's no little splits or anything in them. And yeah, hopefully everything will be tickety-boo. It might have just been a throttle position sensor and we'll be winning in life. So this is what we've got inside the top of the carburetor. This is the sort of rubber diaphragm. This is the slide. and this down here is the needle. So the needle drops into the main jet, or into the emulsion tube, and as it goes up, it allows more fuel into the carb, so you get more fuel and you can go faster. And all this works on air pressure. So the carburettor is tapered, it is a Venturi, and there's a little bit of negative pressure across the carburettor. So the negative pressure feeds up little holes into here and actually sucks this up. And when it sucks it up, pulls the needle out, lets more air in, lets more fuel into the carb. So obviously if the diaphragm has any splits or anything in it and doesn't move when it's supposed to, or if the slide sticks and doesn't drop straight back down, you're always going to get more fuel than you're supposed to. So on a flat slide carburettor, this is mechanical, and you literally pull this up and down with the throttle. On a CV carb, a constant velocity carb, this is done by air pressure, so that the actual air in the carburettor, like going through the carb, is constant, hence the term constant velocity. So these are CV carbs, much easier to use on the road, much more gentle, but there are more bits inside. So I'm going to give these all a check, make sure everything slides nice and easily, pop it all back together. So to demonstrate this a little bit further, this is it with the needle and the slide in the carb. Now if I pull this up, you can see the taper on the needle coming out of the hole, and that hole at the bottom has got the main jet in it, so that's where the fuel comes out. So if I open the twist grip, I open the butterfly at the back, and as the engine sucks more, it creates, it's got more flow, so it can create more negative pressure, and that negative pressure lifts this slide up, and then you get more fuel. So more air, more fuel. Easy as that. So that's the carbs and the airbox and bits all back on. In one of the carb tops I did actually find some fluid, probably a bit of petrol or something, and it shouldn't really be in there, so I'm not quite sure how it got in. It may have been that at one point when I've had the carbs upside down, it's dribbled in. There really isn't, I don't think, another way of it getting in there, so that may have actually been causing part of the problem and just sort of restricting the diaphragm moving properly. Anyway, I've drained all that out, cleaned everything up, put it all back together. Now I'm going to put the tank back on, give it a little test run in here to make sure it actually runs, and then it really needs a test ride. Well, that's the bike back together and running. Tick over's a little bit lumpy at the moment because it's actually a bit cold and I've just knocked it off choke. Unfortunately, I don't actually have time to go riding today because although it's glorious sunshine and a beautiful day, I have to be somewhere else. So that will have to wait for another day when the weather will almost undoubtedly not be as nice, but at least it runs and I've ticked a few boxes. So hopefully I'll have got to the bottom of that. Fingers crossed. Thanks for watching and join me again soon for the R1's road test.